Would you allow me to put my legs up?
Oh, yeah, let me move this to the side.
No, I'll put them up.
If I turn it like that, will that... Yeah, that looks great. Okay. Perfect. That.
I have sodium that flows down my legs and makes my feet swell.
I remember my dad telling me about that. What is that caused by?
Excess sodium, I just took too much. I love sodium with salt, with my dinners, meals.
Uh-huh.
And I just had too much.
At like a young age, you had too much and...
Well, not too young age. I didn't notice the swelling until I was in my 80s.
And was it just a swelling and a pain, and the doctor said you need to lessen your sodium intake?
Well, what he first did is assign me a medicine which made me urinate.
Mm-hmm.
And urination urinated out the sodium in my blood.
Mm-hmm.
And that worked I took that for several years. Then I got that zero gravity chair where it puts my legs up in the air.
Yeah.
So it flows down into my body.
Mm-hmm. I remember my dad telling me that you had a very specific food regimen, right? Because of the sodium that you had to take like a specific type of salt or something, or your diet had to be very strict.
So I gave up salt in my meals.
Okay.
And I have an artificial salt.
Uh-huh.
It's potassium chloride instead of sodium chloride.
Okay.
And that sodium chloride was intrinsic to your body.
Uh-huh.
And potassium chloride is not, so.
And how long have you been taking?
Well, I took that for several years until I got this chair.
Oh, okay.
This chair, if I spend a couple of hours a day with my legs up in the air, the saline fluid flows back down my legs and out through the urine.
Interesting. So do you not have to take the
I don't
salt?
take the medicine anymore.
Really?
And I still try to restrict my salt intake.
Mm-hmm.
But another problem I have right now is losing weight.
Yeah.
And I know my father and my older brother both lost weight and prior to their dying.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to lose weight.
Right.
Maybe that I'm going to die anyway, but...
So last time we talked, actually, I believe it was the night before your brother passed away.
I had both my brothers died in the last few months.
Wow.
Younger brothers.
Mm-hmm.
One in California, Paul, died a couple of months after Harvey died.
Mm-hmm.
Harvey died in about October. And Paul died in January.
So you're the last remaining brother?
I'm the last remaining standing. Yep. My sister and 6 brothers all have passed away. I don't know why, but I guess I'm thankful.
Yeah.
I've exercised to some extent most of my life, so that may partially account for it. Starting at about age 50, I started playing tennis. I played tennis till I was 93,
Mm-hmm.
till I was 93.
Wow. 93 years old playing tennis.
So that was 5 years ago. I had to stop.
And now, so 98, you just turned 98 last month? No, it's in May. You're going to turn 99 in May.
99 in May, yeah.
99 in May. And now, to keep in shape, you said you go up and down the stairs.
5 times. Round
Five
trip.
times round
5
trip.
round trips. And I also do some, what do I want to call them? Leg exercises
Mm-hmm.
to stretch out the nerves. I went in for an operation to have the nerves separated,
Uh-huh.
and she couldn't do it. They were too entangled. So I do exercises that stretch them, the exercises that come out of my spine into my legs.
Okay. What type of exercises?
It's stretching out my arms and leg together, so that it stretches the nerves out.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, like that
Right.
for 30 seconds.
Probably stretches, like the back of your hamstring, maybe your lower back.
Well, it's the stretching the nerves that come out of the spinal column into my legs
Mm-hmm.
that it stretches.
Interesting. Is there anything else that you do physically to stay in shape?
The stairs and push-ups.
Really?
I do 3 sets of 10 of 3 different exercises with my arms.
No, it's just your arm, like your arm weight. You don't have like a dumbbell or anything,
I
right?
have 5-pound weights.
Okay. And what 3 exercises do you do?
Well, the exercise strengthen the arm muscle.
Okay.
You not only pull them up, but you also slow down.
Okay. So you do like a bicep, it's like an up curl, and then what was the other one? A side raise type thing?
Sideways, and then up.
And then up. So you probably feel it in your shoulders and in your biceps, right?
Actually, I don't really feel them very much.
It's just kind of to loosen, maybe get blood flow in the arms.
Supposedly to keep the muscles strength, but I'm losing muscle. Just aging process.
Uh-huh.
And I don't want to do it in my arms. I lose it in the rest of my body. So.
Is there anything about aging that you didn't expect?
Well, I didn't think very much about what I would, what would age.
Uh-huh.
But I know that my father and my older brother, one older brother and 2 older brothers,
Uh-huh.
lost weight before they died.
Right. And you've been kind of losing weight, but you're fighting it.
That's right.
Right.
Exactly.
Do you just increase your calorie intake? What do you do to fight it as far as nutrition?
Well, I don't know exactly what to do,
Mm-hmm.
but in addition to eliminating the restrictions I had on fat and sugar intake,
Uh-huh.
I do take a high protein drink.
What drink?
I've forgotten what it's called.
Okay.
I borrowed it from my daughter, Tina, who lives with me now.
Uh-huh.
She takes some every day, so I started taking it.
I know my wife's grandma does the same thing. She has a drink she got from Costco called Premier Protein, And they're just like these little drinks. They've got 30 grams of protein in them, and she takes them every day. She loves them.
That's the same thing.
Oh, is it? Cool.
I think so.
So the other side of the coin to staying physically fit is staying mentally fit.
That's more important to me than the physically, but they're related.
Right.
I feel very blessed to be more or less logical at this age.
Yeah. And not just logical, but you seem quick. You seem responsive in every sense. And this is not a knock on anyone else, but I speak to someone who's 75 years old, and you can see that their processing speed a lot of times and their wit is starting to slow. But when I talk to you, 20 plus years older, you still seem quick. So
thank you.
You're welcome. What do you think? What do you attribute that to?
I don't know, mostly genes, I think.
Yeah?
I have 3 brothers that died in their 90s.
Yeah?
And my father. So that's a big component of it.
Absolutely.
The fact that I've outlived them all is a blessing.
Uh-huh.
And maybe the amount of exercise I've done through my life, probably more than any of my brothers.
Well, and your consistent mental exercise as well.
And I do maintain, yes.
What do you do to maintain?
Reading, taking classes.
Uh-huh. How many classes are you taking this semester?
I just take 1 class.
Okay.
I audit it. Previous years I've taken 2 classes.
Just at the University of Utah, right?
Yes.
And how do you choose what class?
Well, now I choose whatever the men that drive to the U
Right.
will take me.
Uh-huh.
And they almost always choose something I wouldn't choose.
Right. What is it this semester?
It's world history since 1300.
World history since 1300. I don't know a lot about history, but why 1300 specifically? Just because that's kind of the colonial expansion? Is that why?
That's when the Renaissance began.
Oh, okay.
In Italy. So a lot of things happened at that time. Governments changed. There also is a class, world history up to 1300.
Oh, okay. Starting when?
I've forgotten when it started. I think primitive man, start of written history. Yeah, start of writing, I think. It starts because before that you don't know what.
So just basically the start of recorded history until the Renaissance.
Yeah. I took that class too.
Did you enjoy it?
Yeah.
What would you take? What type of class? You said that you wouldn't choose those ones specifically.
Well, I wouldn't choose them again.
Well, yeah.
Classes I've taken. One class I enjoyed was memory.
Memory?
Yeah, working of the brain.
Interesting.
Utah history. Before this year, I took 2 classes taught by actually a Mormon professor at the U.
Mm-hmm.
and he was great. Utah history and Mormon history.
Interesting. Mormon history. Now, does Mormon history include is that from Joseph Smith, or does that include the Book of Mormon?
No, it starts with Joseph Smith.
Okay. So, like, history of the Restoration and beyond.
Yeah.
And that memory class, did it give you tips on improving your memory?
Yeah, some.
Yeah. I've heard some things like that. Like, I watched a special one time that talked about improving your memory, and one of the things it said was to connect things that you want to remember with imagery or some way that you can make a connection to it to something beyond itself.
Yes.
And that is really helpful.
Yes, it is. My problem is I can't think of something to connect it with.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Sounds like an interesting class. And what do you like to read? Novels, science journals?
Right now, yeah, I read 3 science magazines.
Yeah.
And I also read the New Yorker.
Mm-hmm.
And books.
Novels?
No, I can't. I read so slowly these days
Mm-hmm.
that I can't afford to read a novel. Has to be informative and accurate, truthful. Not by implication, but by words.
So, give me an example. Informative, like, what would be a book that would fall into that category?
Hard to come up with.
Like, do you like autobiographies?
History mostly.
History?
I haven't read any autobiographies recently, but I read history. The biggest novel was in 2 volumes.
Mm-hmm.
Was fiction. A story about World War II. A person following through on his experience through World War II. He rose to a position where he was a commander in the Navy, but assigned to the White House, and he communicated with Roosevelt. But it was his personal life as well, so that was quite an undertaking, but that was about 5 years ago.
Do you like to watch movies?
I do watch some movies.
What type's your favorite?
That's a good question. What have I watched? I watched quite a bit of junk. I call it junk.
Yeah, like, what do you mean?
Well, romantic tales. If
Like Hallmark? Have you watched Hallmark movies?
Yes. Yeah, I have done that. Not recently, though.
What about new movies? Do you go to theaters at all? Do you keep up
anymore.
on? No? Do you have movies that you like to rewatch?
Not really. I don't have any tapes or things like that I regularly put in.
Right. What about sports?
I watch quite a bit of sports, primarily because Tina and Doug watch.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And we watched the Jazz and
Oh yeah.
University of Utah.
Uh-huh.
In addition, they watch sports movies from their Utah grandchildren.
Interesting.
And her son-in-law, my daughter's son-in-law, is the coach of the University, Utah Valley University.
Right. The girls team, right?
Basketball.
Yeah.
Team.
It's awesome.
And whenever they can, they try to take in those games.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, I was about to say, sometimes I go, but I don't think I've ever gone.
Well, it's basically like going. You're with them. You're going vicariously through them, right?
Yeah, they tell me about it.
Right, right.
But we do watch the Jazz together.
Yeah, I love the Jazz.
And they still watch the Celtics.
Yeah?
But Celtics aren't broadcast very often in Utah.
Do you still watch Yankee games, anything like that? Baseball?
I do not watch Yankee games, but when my son Bob comes,
Yeah?
he likes to watch them, so I
Yeah.
watch with him.
No, absolutely. One thing I've always been impressed by with you, and also I've always found interesting, was how you're always learning. Like, you're still in class. It's almost like it's part of your personality, just to be learning all the time, even without a specific reason, just learning for learning's sake.
I do, that's true.
Why do you think that is? What does that say about you?
I don't know. It's just part of my makeup, all I can say. Of course, it drove me through school.
Right.
To a point where I got an advanced degree.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have to excuse me.
Oh, absolutely. Take your time. Do you need help with anything?
No. Don't want to.
No, you're fine. And also let me know, I definitely don't want this to impede on your life at all, so if you...
I have this evening off at your pleasure.
If you ever need to take a break, or if you just want to call it, just let me know. I don't really come in with too much of a plan.
I'm flattered that you want to do it.
I really enjoy it. And not only do I enjoy doing it, I really enjoy looking back and having the conversations later.
Okay.
So yeah. We were talking a little bit about how you've always loved learning.
For some reason or other, I always enjoyed accomplishing.
Yeah.
Doing things.
Uh-huh.
I valued being first in the class.
Yeah.
I never was, but I came close once or twice.
Uh-huh.
And I liked mathematics, and I liked reading. And I did a lot of reading. Well, I would say kind of thinly.
Yeah? What do you mean?
Not getting deep into it, just kind of reading through it as fast as I could.
Through like a textbook?
Well, I did read names are hard to come by. But my mother was horrified that I read Gone with the Wind when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
She felt it was too sexy. And who's the famous Russian writer? Tolstoy.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote a book on War and Peace.
Mm.
And I insisted on reading that. But it's so full of details, by the time I got through, I couldn't really remember it.
It's a long, I mean, it's like this thick, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a thick book.
Yeah. It's probably more than I have read in my whole life, that book.
I read a number of books while I was in high school. Kind of like reading for the purpose of reading, for having read.
Yeah, I do that too. I like almost as if it's like another notch on my belt.
An accomplishment.
Yes, an accomplishment.
Yeah.
I love that. And I do that exact same thing. I listen to books. I do a lot of driving, so I love to listen. And that's actually how I remember, which is why I like to do this, because I like to listen to things.
Okay.
And so I listen to books all the time, and a feeling that I have progressed and that I've kind of downloaded more information into my brain is almost addictive. That might not be the right word, but it definitely gives you a dopamine rush to know that you're smarter today than you were yesterday.
Yes. That's exactly the feeling somehow. I was born with that, and you were born with that.
Yeah.
A drive to succeed.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. That is something I very much relate to. And I asked you that because I have thought about that with myself. Why do I love to learn, and I have a drive to succeed as well. And so in trying to understand that, I've talked to my dad about it and my brothers, and I'd like to get your take on that. I guess, what does that mean to you personally, a drive to succeed? And do you have any thoughts on where that comes from within you?
I think my father had it.
Yeah?
He was a farm boy in Provo, Utah.
Uh-huh.
And he drove himself in a college that didn't exist, and he taught classes in that college.
Mm-hmm.
Then he went on to get a PhD at Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And he did the original work for which Robert Millikan got the Nobel Prize.
The drop experiment or something like that?
Oil drop experiment.
Oil drop experiment. And that was your father.
That was my father.
And your father, my great-grandfather, is Harvey.
That's right.
They just gave him, was it a Grammy? For sound?
Yes. He
It's
did
cool.
that at Bell Laboratories after he went to work.
Wow. So he got a Grammy after he died. Yes. When did he died a long time ago, right? Before I was born, most likely.
Probably.
What I've heard about him is he's got a Grammy. His professor got the Nobel Prize for something that they worked on together.
Yes.
Right? He was integral in, was it stereophonic sound?
Yes.
And what did he do for that?
He invented it.
He invented it.
Yeah.
That seems like a pretty big deal.
Well, he was in charge of a research group at Bell Laboratories.
Mm-hmm.
And they poked into acoustics
Mm-hmm.
And he wrote a book, Speech and Hearing,
Okay.
which I think is a classic book on that subject. It was reissued 20 years later. That's what he did right after he retired.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no question but that he had that bug that we talked about.
Yeah.
He worked hard and curious.
Uh-huh.
So I think I would say I probably got that from him.
Yeah.
And some of my brothers to some extent also.
Mm-hmm.
Of the 4 younger brothers, all have a PhD.
Wow.
3 of them in physics, 1 in math.
And your dad also had a PhD.
Yes, he did. He got it in a year and a half. When he got married and took the train to Chicago, not knowing whether he could get in or not
Mm-hmm.
to the University of Chicago,
Mm-hmm.
which was one of the foremost physics departments in the United States. And he was accepted by Millikan, and I said, did that oil drop experiment. So he got his PhD in about a year and a half.
Wow.
Even though he didn't have all the requirements of an undergraduate. But he went back and taught at the BYU for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
Then accepted a job at Bell Telephone Laboratories.
Mm-hmm.
He tells a story that the president of the university told him, "You're going to regret leaving the BYU. Your children will all leave the church." And so he inquired of the president of the church when he visited the BYU.
Uh-huh.
And the president of the church said, "Go and make an impression. If you stay active in the church, your family will too."
Mm-hmm.
And they did.
Yeah.
They stayed in the church.
And didn't your brother end up being the president of the University of Utah at one point?
Yes.
I was reading about it the other day. I want to say same brother worked for NASA as well, right?
He was the head of NASA.
Head of NASA. So if we were making...
He left the University of Utah to take that job.
Wow.
And then after they had a change in presidency and
Mm-hmm.
a new head of the NASA.
Mm-hmm.
And they ran into trouble with Challenger,
Mm-hmm.
and they called him back in the head of it. And he had the job of straightening out the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So
if you had to make a resume, just for someone who didn't know about your family, your siblings,
yeah,
you go through it and you've said your dad invented stereophonic sound. He worked on a project that won the Nobel Prize. Your brother was the head of NASA, the president of the University of Utah. What would you say about you? What do you think someone would want to know as far as like bullet points?
bullet points.
Yeah.
I was I got a PhD from MIT.
Uh-huh.
Rose to a director at the Bell Telephone Laboratories
Mm-hmm.
in a number of subjects, including microwave devices.
Mm-hmm.
Discovered a number of new physics phenomena in semiconductors.
Mm-hmm. Is that what you talked about last time?
Did I have forgotten?
I don't remember. It goes over my head.
That's kind of inverse order. I did that first
Uh-huh.
as a starting scientist, and then was promoted. In some ways, I'm sorry I did that.
Really? Why is that?
I enjoyed that research
Yeah.
much more than the administration.
And explain to me again what that is, what you're talking about with the semiconductors.
A semiconductor is an insulator which you add impurities to, and it becomes conducting,
Okay.
electrical
Uh-huh.
conducting. And it becomes electrical conducting by the impurities embedded in the semiconductor, and it's a charged ion, and it's compensated by an electron in a conducting band that's able to move through the crystal.
Mm-hmm.
So it becomes conducting because of the impurity that you add.
Okay.
And so what I discovered was the spin resonance, the fact that the electron that's attached to the semiconductor has an electron spin, which you can detect with electromagnetic fields.
Mm-hmm.
And I discovered that.
Wow. Is that work that you did in the
Bell Laboratory.
Bell Laboratories? Is that when you talk about the radiation or the radiology? I don't remember laboratories that you worked in. Is that what that is?
The MIT radiation laboratories.
Uh-huh.
I worked there during the war,
Right.
in between getting an undergraduate degree and going on to graduate school.
Uh-huh.
So I spent the Second World War at the MIT Radiation Laboratory.
And what did you do there?
I worked on magnetrons. Magnetron was a vacuum tube which generated microwave energy. Microwave is 10 centimeters
Mm-hmm.
wavelength. So there was nothing that generated it. Particular, it generated a large pulse of energy at that frequency. And that was useful during the war to detect submarine snorkels,
Mm-hmm.
because it had that short wavelength
Uh-huh.
and could detect a snorkel in the presence of waves in the ocean. So the German submarines could submerge so that the only thing that was showing above the water was that snorkel.
Mm-hmm.
And they could charge their batteries with air drawn in from the snorkel. And so they didn't have to surface in order to charge their batteries. That means that they could be detected. So that's what they were used for. what I did was discovered a problem with those microwave generators.
Okay.
And the problem was they didn't always operate in a mode that produced energy down a waveguide or into an antenna.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes they operated in a mode which didn't emit any energy, just operated internally.
Okay.
We called it double moded because I operated in two different modes. And I worked on why did it do that.
Interesting.
And derived a method of avoiding it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Oh, that's our timer. Now after, so that was kind of more beginning of your professional life, right?
Partly. It happened early in my life, but I did things before that.
Right. So just rounding out, I know you talked about some of the other things that you had done that you feel would be kind of, bullet points as far as accomplishments go. Things that you feel proud of. As far as career-wise, what are the things that you're most proud of that you haven't already mentioned? I know you talked about a couple of the scientific articles that you've had published.
Yes.
What were those about? What were those on?
Mostly they were on aspects of microwave devices.
Okay. So a similar vein to what you had already worked on.
Which I had worked on during the war.
Mm-hmm.
And when I joined Bell Laboratories,
Mm-hmm.
I continued to work on some of those.
Okay.
And published some articles. But one of the things which I did, I think probably the foremost piece of physics that I published on
Uh-huh.
was detection of the spin of the electron attached to the impurities that I talked about
Uh-huh.
in the semiconductors. And it turned out that they, if they weren't too concentrated, separate from each other,
Mm-hmm.
they had different orientations with respect to the magnetic field.
Mm-hmm.
And that was already known that the impurities we added had a magnetic moment which interacted with the electron magnetic moment, causing different orientation. Different orientations had a different frequency.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, the first one was antimony impurity that we added to silicon. Antimony was an element which had a nucleus magnetic moment
Mm-hmm.
of one spin, which means it had two possible orientations in the magnetic field. And so when we added antimony to a semiconductor and detected the spin
Mm-hmm.
of that electron, it had two pulses, two frequencies,
Mm-hmm.
depending upon which way it was oriented with respect to the nucleus.
Mm-hmm.
So, arsenic
Uh-huh.
also can be added as an impurity. It has four possible orientations. Spin of 3. No, that's not right either. But it has four possible orientations.
Mm-hmm.
And when we put that in the magnetic resonance detector, it had 4 pulses, just as you predicted.
Right, right.
And then we tried antimony.
Uh-huh.
Antimony has 2 isotopes. One with 6 orientation and the other with 8. Total of 14.
Mm-hmm.
Sure enough, we had detected all 14 resonances. That was probably the greatest physics accomplishment.
Yeah. Was that something at a young age that you fantasized about? Did you have a childlike imagination towards physics?
I don't know if I call it towards physics, but I did have a great deal of interest of the way basically things worked.
Okay. As a child?
Well, certainly by high school anyway.
Yeah? So you're saying maybe engineering as well, or construction?
I had thought maybe engineering as a career,
Mm-hmm.
but I was much more interested in physics, the way things worked, rather than the ability to make things work.
So the way things work at their most rudimentary level. So not just the way things work like the way a car works, but more the way things work like the way an atom works, or the way that...
Well, yeah, I was also interested in the way a car
Uh-huh.
theoretically works,
Uh-huh.
not the latest design.
Right. Like it's makeup.
I wanted to know what a cylinder was and why the number of
Mm-hmm.
pulses it had.
So you're a naturally very curious person, then.
I'm a
Curious person.
naturally curious.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And you think that goes into your drive to succeed, like you said before? It's part of just a curiosity about the world?
It certainly is a part of the curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
Part of this desire to succeed, I think, is something else.
I think it has to do with growing up with brothers, growing up in a competitive environment, or your dad.
Maybe.
Yeah?
Maybe it has something to do with that.
Were you competitive in your childhood?
I was always competitive, yes.
And they were competitive as well, your siblings?
Particularly my brother, just older than I.
Yeah, that seems to be the way it is.
And anyway, as teenagers, we fought all the time.
Yeah? Fought physically, verbally?
Some,
A little both.
but mostly we were just antagonistic to each other.
Okay. And how did that develop in adulthood?
We separated. Well, we roomed. My parents insisted that we room together at BYU the 1 year I spent there,
Mm-hmm.
and that was not pleasant. We just didn't get along. I would suppose I was jealous of him, and he was jealous of me.
Yeah?
Particularly, I was better at schoolwork. I got better grades.
Uh-huh.
But when we got out of school, he succeeded in his business world much better.
Okay.
At any rate, by the time he was ready to die, we had made up.
How long ago did he die?
He died when he was 71.
Oh, so like a long time ago.
I
Maybe
would have
20.
I would have been 69.
So 30 years ago.
Now I'm 98. Yeah. 30 years.
Wow. So he died before I was even born. Only 25.
Yeah.
Outliving all of your siblings and your parents and obviously my Grammy. I mean, how do you describe that? Does it weigh heavily on you?
What, my difficulties with my brother?
No, just the fact that you've outlived everyone, all the influences in your life and your wife and all of your brothers, you've outlived all of them. What is that like?
Last October, my 2 younger brothers were in this living room, sitting on that couch.
Uh-huh.
The 2 of them were on that couch. I was here.
Uh-huh. Last October, wow. The 2 brothers that passed away in the last 2 months.
Yeah.
What does it feel like now? What goes through your head?
Well, it happened so fast.
Uh-huh.
At that time, I felt they were reasonably okay in the head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We joked a little, and I remember saying, just think, Paul, who was the youngest, when you get to be 100, Harvey will be 102 and I'll be 104. And Paul said, oh no, you were going to be 3 years older than that. Oh, no, you're right, because his birthday comes first.
Uh-huh.
So before we became 3 years older, we were 2 years older.
Interesting.
Anyway, he was logical enough to comment that.
I remember you telling me, for some reason this keeps turning off. I remember you telling me when I was younger that the probability, there's some chart, and I don't remember what it's called, but it's like the probability of you living to a certain age based on your current age. And basically every year that you got older, the probability that you would live older increased by more than how much older you got. And so basically the logic would be if you kept living, you'd live forever, according to that chart.
No, it doesn't work that way. Actually, the probability that you'll die a lesser number of years decreases.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm 98. The probability that I will die I think, is 6 years.
Okay. Is that, are you afraid of death at this point in your life?
No.
No? You have a relationship with it?
Sometimes I think about it, but I'm persuaded that we do live after death,
mm-hmm.
and that spirit is an important element in our makeup. But I don't think it's exactly like most people tend to think about it in the church.
Yeah.
It's not like a person that's like we're mortal, standing out there.
Right.
It has some unusual capabilities.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's much more complex than that.
In what way?
I don't know. I just don't think it's as simple as imagining it's just like us, only dead.
Right, yeah. It's not just a second copy of us after this life.
Yeah.
It's like like an elevated being.
Yes. But I don't know.
Yeah. Neither do I.
But I don't worry about it very much. I think in some way we exist in some kind of form.
Mm-hmm. Maybe intelligences, is that?
Maybe intelligences, if it's something.
Grammy died in 2010? 2009, so it's been 11 years. Over a decade.
Yeah.
I mean, I've obviously never had a spouse die. And I know that it was, she had cancer and everything, and so it wasn't as if it was something sudden, but obviously you spent an entire life with her.
Yes.
Moving on and still continuing to live another 10, 11, hopefully 15, 20 years since then. What do you do to adjust after spending your entire life with someone? How do you cope with it?
Well, I spent 10 years by myself, living by myself, doing everything that I had to do. I lived in the same house, this house. I fixed my meals and tied my ties and did a lot of things that I didn't do before that she did.
Okay.
But for about 3 years before she died, I had to pretty well take care of her.
Sure.
And I can't say that was pleasant, but it was a lot better than not having her.
Oh, absolutely.
So I don't know what else to say about it. I don't have communications with her.
Right.
Some people claim communications, but I don't.
Right. I don't want to keep you too much longer. I might just click this one more time. And then, for some reason, it's
Hasn't gone the full length.
No, it hasn't. It, for some reason, keeps just going for a couple of minutes and then turning off, which is frustrating, but I don't want to keep you too much longer. I am interested, I guess, to know your perspective on, living life after the passing of a spouse.
One thing I'm, as I said, very convinced about is that there is an aspect of life after death, in which we somehow exist. But I'm skeptical that the simple picture of what it's like that we have in the church probably isn't right.
Right.
But I don't know what it is right.
That we might have a watered down understanding of what it really is, maybe on the right track, but
yeah, exactly. We have a picture which somehow represents what it really is like, but it's quite more complicated than what we visualize.
Yeah. You obviously have a confidence. I feel that, you're going to see her again, you're going to see your brothers again, those relationships in some form, maybe not the form that we have always been taught, but in some form will exist. Looking back, I guess, what do you miss most about her?
That's a good question. If I hadn't gone through that period in which she was in pain and unhappy and uncomfortable, that took all my attention. There was a period of about 3 or 4 days at the end of her life where the machine that was keeping her alive got unplugged. I don't know if she unplugged it or it was an accident, but anyway, it got unplugged. And that meant that her digestive system was turned off. She didn't, no longer any water or food having to deal with it, and that was causing her the most pain. Her digestive system was wrapped around with cancer fibers and painful. Whenever she ate, it was very painful. So when the machine turned off at Fletcher, she lived for about 3 days, 4 days maybe. She was great.
Yeah.
She was full of life and enthusiastic in conversation with her children and with me. And it was a period which my children remember fondly. And then she got, what do they call her? Memory. A stroke.
Okay.
She got a stroke, which she was unable to talk anymore. And that lasted for about 2 days, 3 days maybe, and she passed away.
Okay.
But it was such a delightful time. I think it was during that period which she took off her wedding ring. I had bought her an engagement ring and then a wedding ring, so there were 2 rings. And she had them welded together into one ring. And she wore that all her life. Anyhow, during those 3 days, she took off the ring and gave it to Peggy,
Really?
who didn't have a engagement ring, because she thought she could use it.
That's very thoughtful.
It was a very thoughtful thing to do. I think Peggy appreciates it. So they all looked at that period of time that most of them were around.
I think I have actually heard my I think I've heard my dad talk about that. What an awesome kind of last experience with her.
Yeah.
You got to see her, because you said there was about 3 years where she was suffering and more sick and needed constant care. So to have those last 3 days right before she died where you could kind of relive
Yeah.
and have that
It
old
was a very
energy.
special time. But when she got the stroke, she couldn't talk. She could partially paralyzed.
Mm-hmm.
It was not a pleasant time.
Mm-hmm. Well, Bobpa, thank you for taking the time to talk with me.
You're welcome.
I absolutely enjoy this. I've never really had the opportunity to hear a lot of these types of things directly from you, so I do enjoy it a lot. I'll send you the link to the video if you want to watch it, but me and my wife like to listen to them. So,
Okay.
Is there anything I can do for you? Is there anything I can do to make your life easier?
You know, the thing which makes me happiest is that you want to come over and talk to me. That's fine.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to come by again. I want to make sure not to intrude too much on your life. It's around 9
You're
o'clock.
not going to intrude because I don't really do a lot of
Okay.
things. I go to school
Uh-huh.
and I go to church.
Right.
But I don't go to much hell. Oh, and I go to dinners that Peggy and Catherine says, as well as here.
Mm-hmm.